everybody. Welcome to Anderson Ranch and our summer faculty lecture series. I'm Emil Gorman, studio coordinator of digital fabrication here at Anderson Ranch. I'm thrilled that we'll be hearing from both Letha Wilson and Holly Roberts tonight. I want to welcome our virtual participants watching tonight, as well as our Board of Trustees and National Council. Thank you for your support. Before we begin, please take a moment to silence your cell phones. I would also like to remind everyone to attend the ranch-wide orientation right here in Shermer Hall tomorrow morning at 8:45 a.m. I want to start by recognizing that Anderson Ranch campus resides on the traditional ancestral territory of the Ute people, who called the Roaring Fork Valley and beyond home for over 800 years. Through our mission to promote a wide range of arts, cultures, and voices, we commit to partner with and honor the indigenous ancestors and residents of this sacred land where we learn, work, and create. Tonight's program will consist of 2 faculty lectures followed by a Q&A. First, it's a pleasure to introduce Letha Wilson. Letha Wilson was raised in Colorado and currently based in Taconic and Brooklyn, New York. She earned her MFA from Hunter College and attended Skowhegan. She is represented by Grimm Gallery in Amsterdam, New York, and London, and Gallery Christophe Gaillard in Paris. She recently had a solo exhibition at the Center for Maine Contemporary Art in Rockland, Maine. Please join me in welcoming Letha.
Hello. Hi. Good to see y'all. Thank you, Emil. My name is Letha, and I think this is my 8th year teaching at the ranch, so it's cool to come back. And like Emil said, I grew up in Colorado, so I still kind of consider it my home state. And I started beginning with, I'm going to do a little different, not my normal lecture, but kind of show you more recent work. But just to give a little background to me, we grew up in Greeley. Actually, I was born in Hawaii, and our family moved to Colorado when I was 4. We lived in Greeley, and my dad really loved the outdoors, and we would go up to the Rocky Mountains basically every weekend, camping, hiking. And starting when I was in 6th grade, we would do these like week-long backpack trips into kind of deep areas of, always within the state of Colorado, but Flat Tops Wilderness, Rocky Mountain National Park, and there were some cameras passed around. So this photograph would have been taken from my dad, and that's me and my mom. So there was this sort of family thing of like, people taking the photographs, and then at the end of the summer, my dad would choose the best one, and that would be blown up on the wall, and those were kind of like my family photographs. So this was one. I think this is actually our first hike when I was in 6th grade. So I moved to the East Coast. I went to Syracuse for undergrad and have been in New York State ever since, which is crazy. But I always kind of kept these landscapes with me when I was there, and this contrast between kind of East Coast and West Coast, sort of nature. Also, I moved to New York City in 1998 and lived there for 20 years. So I was interested in this idea of, particularly how a landscape photo can kind of travel, bring you somewhere, or evoke a memory of a place. And at the same time, I was actually a painting major in undergrad, but I was really always interested in learning different techniques and medium processes. And in grad school, I started honing in on really thinking about, in some ways, how to like destroy all these categories or ways of presenting that we have around photography. And I felt like photography was very separate from art, and to me, it's just like a tool. So I thought that was an interesting area to push. So this is a concrete work of mine. So this is sort of like, I would say, what I'm known for. This is from 2020. So I'm gonna show you all images I've made, work from the last 5 years. And this kind of like, I started going back to the darkroom out of grad school, and it was a way of making the photograph more of a material for me, and ironically less precious. So I still print in the darkroom. So I'm shooting with analog. I also shoot with digital now. I carry both. And something about the process of working in the darkroom, very spontaneous. I often have like elements in here, like photogram elements where there's objects on the paper. And this was a photograph I took in Hawaii. I got to go back with the travel grant. And I'm literally pouring concrete on the face of the sea prints. And there's also a plywood box that holds it all together so you can see the texture of the plywood. The other kind of body of work I started in 2017. That was around the time I started working with UV printing, which our class is going to get the pleasure to work with here at Anderson Ranch. I love teaching here because they keep up with the technologies, and our class is able to cross over between painting and Fab Lab, and there is a UV printer here, which is kind of a rare thing. So UV printing, you can print directly onto almost any surface under 2 inches thick, and it's very durable. So this is a photograph printed directly onto Corten steel. And there was actually an outdoor piece here at Anderson Ranch until, wait, was this the piece? Oh yeah, this piece is at Anderson Ranch until what, a month or two ago? So it came here even. And there's another image on the other side, so 2 different places. Oops, that's the back one first, but this is a piece that's at Rochester at RIT campus. And another one I made for Institute of Contemporary Art in San Diego, sort of a human scale and kind of using the concrete as like a step in the work. Oops, sorry, wrong way. So there's kind of like view holes and different vantage points. I'm really interested in that in working with photographs and sculpture and how your perspective can change what you're seeing as you walk around a piece. And this is a public art, oh, that's not the best image. Oh no, it looks different. Okay, sorry, I gotta look at this. This is a public art piece for an elementary school in Brooklyn that I finished in 2020. It's UV print on dye bond. And it's a new addition to an existing elementary school with a new building. So this is a great project. It took me, it was a 3-year project that luckily was able to open in spite of COVID. And then the pieces there's 3 pieces on 3 different floors. This kind of has this sort of tongues coming out. I often return to these sort of geometric shapes in conversation with the image. And I think in the work about like this balance between kind of the wildness of nature and then the human side trying to control and understand. And it's not necessarily a hierarchy, but it's like complicated. So there's some sort of balance there in between kind of an order and a natural chaos. And this photograph is from Valley of Fire, Nevada. A really amazing state park, I highly recommend. It's only like 45 minutes from Las Vegas, so. And so in COVID, my husband got a job in Hartford, Connecticut. At that point, we'd moved upstate. And I kind of started with these huge pieces working in steel, but I really was so interested in working more with steel and metal. So I joined a maker space and just took all these welding classes and got more comfortable working with the metal brake and different tools. So this is like a scale, I mean, it looks huge right here, but it's only like this tall. So this, being able to make a sculpture that I can kind of make myself and kind of hold, it's not, a 1,000-pound sculpture. And that the welding marks are part of the work, that kind of burn that happens. So each piece has 2 different images. And sometimes you can really only see one side at once. You can kind of see both there. And I would say like every year or maybe twice a year, ideally, I really go out and maybe do a week intense sort of hike and trip where I'm photographing, and often by myself. And that's really and then I work with those images for about the next year or 2. So this is This was Craters of the Moon National Park, which is in Idaho, another great little park that I went to in fall 2020. And then kind of missed the wall, so started just kind of on a whim, these frame pieces where I'm welding the frame, welding the photograph in, but you can also see the wall behind it, which I always like that. And then this was a series I did for a show at Hired Pictures Gallery, which is really a photo gallery, but they have been working with me for a while. And I had this idea for this show of it being almost like a single book with different pages, but that each page, which was a single image, could be a sculpture, or it could be a wall piece, or it could be all arranged in all these different ways. So it could kind of contain multitudes. So there were 24 pieces in the show, printed on either brass, copper, or steel. And I made these hinges. That was really the most challenging part. And so the pieces could really be oriented in all these different ways. That's like the flat version of one in the different ways. That was probably the funnest part of the show, was like the day the photographer came was like, okay, let's photograph this and this and this. And like, that was really fun for me. And I'd like to revisit this idea and like, if it were that size, wouldn't that be cool? So kind of scaling things up again. I just have a couple of these, all single images. I like this one, it's halfway on the wall. Could be folded up all together. Could be hugging the pedestal, or half and half. And then I had a solo show 2 years ago in London, and that was kind of a chance for me to make a new series of these wall pieces, scaling them up a little bit. Again, now that I have my own kind of welding set up at my house, even though I can only work in the winter because my floors of my studio are wood, so I have to work in the driveway, but that's okay. So I can really make all these myself, basically, aside from getting them printed at a printer in New York City. That's a photograph from Antelope Canyon. I think it's Lower Antelope Canyon. That's an amazing place outside Page, Arizona. That is very, very difficult to take a bad photograph in there, but the Navajo Nation. Another one from Craters of the Moon. So, trying to get this image to kind of like hug the frame or create this conversation with the frame itself, and really revealing the kind of distress I put it through. They're all kind of a balance between kind of saving it and destroying it, the image, that is. These are from the London show. And then I also made a series of sculptures there that were in parts that could come apart, so they could be kind of modular. So they're pretty small. They're maybe like, 16 inches, under 2 feet, maybe 18 inches or so. So I believe I made 12 little sculptures for the show. I'm sorry, I realized I didn't put an install shot in there, but oh well. I sort of arranged these images a little bit on the fly. So often the sculptures, you only see one image or the other as you're looking at them. And another kind of body of work, which I really enjoy, is a site-specific work where I can work with a gallery and work with the wall of a gallery. So this, no, it's just my angle. Sorry, I keep looking at the screen and I don't know why it looks different. So this was a show at Purchase. I was an artist in residence at Purchase, SUNY Purchase in New York. And there's this one huge wall in the gallery that's kind of like the best wall. And there's also these windows above it. So I did this piece where it's almost like taking a section of the wall out and then cantilevering out towards you. And then you have some light from outside that comes through the piece and sort of creates the sundial on the floor. So this piece is called Slit Slot Canyon. And a piece like this is destroyed at the end of the show. Actually, on my Instagram, a choreographer approached me and at SUNY Purchase and so I let his dance students kind of use the destruction of the piece as like this final performance. That was really, for me, really exciting to see. I had no idea how they were going to do it, but they like carried the wall over their heads and then busted it with their bare hands and feet. So that's like a good way to end the piece. And gave me some ideas for thinking about that. And another most recent, this was from last year at the CMCA show in Maine. And the gallery I was showing in had the sort of temperature of the lights were quite yellow. And the gallery behind it has all this sunlight because it has all these skylights. So I was really interested in this sort of point of inflection at this barrier between the natural light and the artificial light in the space. So I had this wall built here, and this is a photograph from Colorado of this aspen grove. My parents used to live in Craig, Colorado, so this is kind of up by them. So I mounted this photograph and then really busted these holes through the wall. So it looks quite blue in those little holes, but that's because of the difference of the color in the two rooms of the light. So this is what it looks like from the other side. You can see how yellow the light is. And this is like a detail. So I really actually used a cardboard photo tube to break the holes. That was just a coincidence, but that was kind of nice. The tubes that held the photographs. So something about that. This is a piece I'm working on right now. This is actually just a model for a piece. So often when I'm trying to figure out my ideas, I'm making, scale models to kind of figure out the idea. And also I just think better with my hands. I can't just put it on Rhino and boop, 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 I have to kind of see it. I think I naturally have a 2D eye, so the sculptural element is a little more challenging and I have to actually test it out. So this is a model for what will be a final piece that will be printed on steel that's folded and on an aluminum open frame that will be permanently installed at the University of Oregon, a new building, a night building, a science building they're building on campus. So, and concrete piece I made last year. So the nice thing for me about working with these, so I have this archive of negatives, both analog and digital, and it's just kind of nice to go back through them sometimes and just, for me, working in the darkroom is actually very spontaneous, and I could just sort of pick up an old negative and revisit it, have that sort of fluidity, and then also the pouring of the concrete on the piece, which is also something I have some control over, but that also is not in my control. And then these are very new babies, so this is also only this tall. So this summer, these are my newest test. I really want to bring together the concrete and the sea prints, but also the welding. This was my first test, but I really liked it. And when I'm printing it on steel that's thin enough where I can kind of cut it on the fly and make some more spontaneous decisions. So, and also make my own steel frames. There's a detail of the welding. And this, this I just finished last week, but it's actually in a show. I had a deadline, so it's in a show at Klaus von Nixegent in Tribeca. Again, poured this concrete in the photograph and then kind of went back in, adding the UV print on steel and even pushing it down into these sort of holes from that. So that was fun. I'm still kind of learning. It still takes me a really long time to understand working with these materials. So the process of working with them, I don't know, it takes years because it's just understanding the materials and what they can do. And lastly, this is just a little sculpture I made this summer, and again, trying to bring these metal elements back with the concrete. It's about this tall, but sort of I printed the photographs on brass and really sort of bent them and used this concrete base that's kind of holding it together. Can you tell I shot these with my iPhone like last week? Sorry, this is a little casual, more casual than usual. That's my last image, so I will be answering questions at the end after Holly. Holly, are you here? Okay. After Holly does her lecture, so thank you. Okay, do I just pull this? Hey, dongle. Okay.
Thank you so much, Letha. It is an honor to introduce Holly Roberts. Holly Roberts has exhibited nationally and internationally and published 3 monographs of her work. Holly Roberts Works 1989 through 1999, and Holly Roberts Works 2000 through 2009. Please join me in welcoming Holly.
So Letha and I, can everybody hear that okay? We have parallel taught a number of times. And I always feel like my class is like we're in a donkey cart going along a road. And Letha's students are like on jets and shooting off to the stars, but it's okay. So what I basically have been doing for all of my art life is combining paint and photography. And I started out painting over silver prints, and then gradually transformed that to where I was gluing the photographs onto panels and painting over them. But the main thing is that I've always used my own photographs. They're always about my life, about what's going on with my experience and my family and everything that's going on. So this is one from 1998, and it's called Mother and Daughter. And this is, I think becoming a mother was kind of a shock to me. And this is, I felt like I was a grown-up now, you know. I had lipstick and I had a purse, and this is actually my daughter, Rami. But so that's what this one's about. One of the things I've been doing all along is experimenting with different ways to combine the photography and the paint. And one of those ways is by doing transfers or transparencies. So again, this was a friend who'd had open heart surgery. You can see the scars on his chest. And of course, I got him to pose for me. And this was combining photographs and Photoshop so that the figure was wrong. The legs are too small. And then, of course, I put on the head of a coyote. And again, these are all images. These are my photographs. These are photographs that have some meaning to me. So this is called Man with Coyote Head. This is another one. It's called Coyote at the Door. And if you look, the little house there is my husband and I are in the windows looking out. And I've always said that's the sort of a thing on the wolf at the door, which is bad news. And so in this case, it was again a figure that I took, put on this coyote head, and that's us in the house, and stuff's happening. That's the house. That was from a painting that I then took and put into the other painting. I used to do oil over silver prints, and then in 2004 I switched so that I was doing acrylic with a photograph on top. So that's kind of what's happening now. This is another transparency. So it's from another painting that I then put in the tree, the horse's body, the horse's head. I have a long history with horses. I traded my bottle for a pair of cowboy boots when I was 4 and kind of have kept along in that way. So I've used horses a lot. This is that same horse head. This is using something called paint peels, which are when you take acrylic or latex paint, you pour it out, let it dry, and then you can peel it back up, put it back down, and actually use it as paint. So it's a sort of a wonderful way to paint without, I mean, you're painting, but you have a different kind of control. And that's the same horse head from the other one. Everything in there are paint peels except the legs, the tail, and the head. So COVID for me was actually kind of great. I hate to say it, but I'm very much an introvert, so that meant I didn't have to go to parties, I didn't have to go to openings, go out. I could just stay in my studio and work. And so I did a number of paintings during that time. And I think a lot of what I loved about COVID was that nature came back. You know, there were these towns where elephants were walking through, and you know, we didn't have cars on the roads, and the atmosphere was getting clearer and cleaner, and all these sort of lovely things were happening because we were in our homes afraid of each other. And so I began to do these images that were really about, I think, that nature coming back. This is called Nature Mother, and you can see the coyotes at her feet, the snake. She's holding a rabbit in her hands. This is really kind of a sweet one for me. Usually I'm not known for my sweet images. And this is a great example of taking all these different materials and combining them. Her chest is made from dried mud. The bottom is a painting that I did. The legs are paint peels. The trees are trees that were cut and shaped. And of course, then the coyotes' bodies are formed from different things. And those are my danskos that I always like to wear. Although they've worn out now, the soles fell off. This is Coyote Mother. Again, same idea, same sort of feeling of being back with nature. She's got her kids on a leash. She's out, snakes, but no big deal. This is my husband, Bob. And he was a physician for 30 years, and then about 7-8 years ago, he retired, and he started doing art. And the wonderful thing for him was he started being able to work with his hands. And so this is called Working Man. It's his eyes, his mouth, and his ears. I think the gloves came from somewhere else. But it was a sort of wonderful realization that he didn't have to be a mental guy. He could be a physical guy using his hands. Just like Letha said, it's when you use your hands that the good stuff happens. This is sort of a self-portrait. I was experimenting with paint and trying to see if I could get a really beautiful hard edge, which is hard to do. You have to put the tape down, and then you put polymer, and then that forms a clear edge. Otherwise, you get fuzz. But instead of sort of doing this spontaneous, active painting, I was doing this more controlled one. That's my mouth. That's someone else's eyes, but the braids, of course, refer to me. This is another self-portrait. It's called Forest Rider. I did a lot of photographs of graffiti, and I kind of stopped using them because I had some work up in a show, and a young woman from LA, this was back in Virginia, she came up to me and she knew what the graffiti was saying because she was familiar with the language of it. And I didn't like that I didn't know what I was telling people. So anyway, I've sort of stopped using graffiti as much. And of course, the back is dictionary pages. So the background was not a painting, it was the dictionary pages with the paint then put on top of it. This is called Woman with Worries. I think very good, appropriate for right now. That's me again. I actually had a black eye. I got hit in the face with a soccer ball. And it was interesting because I went to a function and there were a number of art-related people, and no one would ask me about my eye. I think they all just assumed Bob was smacking me around. And finally, somebody said, "What happened to you, Holly?" And I said, "I got hit with a soccer ball." And anyway. So I like to do these religious pieces. This is called Jesus Leaving. And if you can see, he's had it. He's thrown his cross in the back. He's taken off. He's got his beautiful little truck. And the birds up above are circling around. This was a combination. These are not my photographs, but this was a head of a Jesus-like person and then an acupuncture figure. And over a really beautiful, it's called crackle, where you get the surface of the painting to crackle. This is called A Religious Man. So most recently, these are all within the last year, I've found myself doing primarily animals. And always before I'd done a lot of people, a lot of very personal sort of stories about my life and who I was and things going on. But these animals seem to be taking over. And what I found is that I'm using a little bit of photographic information and then building the rest from other stuff. And the underneath paintings I just love. I just think they're beautiful. At some point I want someone to say, why did she cover up those beautiful paintings? They were so good. But no one has said that yet. So I also want the same with my photographs for them to say, she didn't need to cut them up. They were just great photographs. But that's not happened either. So this is called Guard Dog. And this is, my mother had dementia towards the last 10 years of her life, and she had this wonderful dog, Abby. And Abby didn't judge her. She didn't say, you've already said that before. She just loved my mom. And she died, and my mom didn't live much longer beyond that. But it was this kind of, when I did the piece, I just was in tears, because it was about this wonderful relationship that this dog was able to, this friendship and love the dog was able to give my mother. Anyway, that's Abby's head, and as you can see, it's pretty much all painted stuff, making up the image as well as the background painting. I photograph deer, and especially here, they're just everywhere. So I always try and just at any time I get them. This is called deer resting. As you can see, again, the background painting, I'm loving these background paintings. They're so exciting to do, and then I have to figure out to make a collage that's as good as the painting. This is called deer resting. So the body is made of a paper that I painted. The legs are God knows what, but mostly it's that painting supporting that deer. This is called deer watching. Same thing, how far can I get? Making the body be something else, but yet we're going to believe it. The legs are just, I'll paint on paper that resists the paint, sort of beads up, so you get these really interesting surfaces and textures. They're shiny, and I'll cut them up and put them together with other ones. This one is very recent, I just finished it, and it is paint peels. The bodies are paint peels. Of course, the heads are from deer that I photographed. But just these, how far can you take it? How far can I get you to believe that these are two deer having a kind of a conversation? And this one again, this was actually quite a few bits of photographs, different horse body parts, the spotted rear end, the gray middle, and the black head. And this is called Horse with Black Head. And then this one to me was just a very, it's called Lonely Horse, but there was something about this. This is a older mare, and just as she was walking sort of with a swirling background, very, very big. For me, this is about 40 by 60. And then again, using the painted paper to make the body, but just this lovely sort of still lonely feeling. And this one, I just love. I was able to cut up the mule, and then with another process, transfer these lines onto the painting. So you get this wonderful wild thing happening to the body. But again, you buy it, or I buy it. I hope you guys do. Again, very recent, just within the last couple of months. So taking the photograph, splitting it up, having the painting, and then putting it on either side. And this one was a flicker. A friend, a lot of my friends, if they have dead birds, they let me know, and I pop them in the freezer until I can photograph them. And it's always a little bit alarming to come across one of the dead birds. But anyway, again, the background painting, that's his entire body, but then taking a piece of painted paper to do the center part. I think this might be close to the end. This was another paint peel that was just wild, just swirly, and trying to get it to be believable as the bird's body. Bird flying. And that's it.
But we'll set up chairs. Thank you, everyone. We'll have a chance to do a brief Q&A. If you have a question, please raise your hand and I'll pass the mic to you.
Lights too, so it's not so bright.
Yeah. Question, Holly. I was thinking about, you taking your own photographs. And I was curious at what point you felt it was important that you need to do that versus like found images. And I'm also curious, like when you're going out shooting, are you looking for something? Or are you just kind of collecting? Just sort of curious about that.
So I am just kind of collecting. I never have an idea in mind of what I'm going to do. I just take photographs, print them out, look at them, and then start putting them together. But it's the idea. I think it's this. I'm a sort of a hunter, so I'm collecting, finding, collecting, finding, collecting, putting together, but not like a real photographer. Would be thinking, oh, here's this beautiful deer, and I'm going to, make a great composition. It's more, oh, I got the deer, and then I have it. So does that?
Yeah. No, I relate to this thing of sort of hunting.
Yeah.
Not really having a preconceived idea of what you're going to shoot and just sort of looking. So anyways, thank you. I forgot. I got to keep this.
My question's for you, Letha. So I guess just for those that don't know, C prints are a fairly unstable process. So the print exposed to light over 10 or 20 years will change colors quite a bit. And I find that impermanence mixed with the concrete and steel a really interesting dichotomy. And I'm wondering if the fact of that is something conceptually relevant for you in your work?
Yeah, great question. I think that, and also I think there's something specific about photography being concerned with like it not changing, which just like isn't possible in the world. So I think that, there's part of the work that's like accepting the fact that it will change, it may change. I think that not everyone's happy about that, but also I think that's how work, like actual objects in the world will change, especially with the outdoors pieces where it could be completely gone, but then the metal itself is sort of taking over and that becomes it's like they're switching positions of what has more, presence. So, yeah.
Excuse me if this is a rudimentary question, but I'm wondering how the colors are created on the metal. Is it an ink? Can you detail a little bit about?
Yeah. So it is a relatively new printing process called UV printing or flatbed printing. And basically the ink is, sprayed down. I mean, Emil could probably talk about it because there is a UV printer here on campus in the Fab Lab. But basically the ink is sprayed down and then it's cured with UV light. And it's basically plastic, it's very strong. And you can print it on pretty much anything. A Pop-Tart, there's a Pop-Tart up there someone printed on. So if you want to take a peek in the Fab Lab, you can see all the ways this printing technology can work.
Thank you.
So before any more questions, one of the things I just wanted to say is, at this point in my life, I'm 73, I have a ton of work, and what I'm doing is donating work to art centers, like small universities or art centers. So if anybody has knows anything like that, let me know, get in touch with me, because I'm very seriously trying to disperse this work and donating it. Anyway, so, Kathy.
Hey, Holly. So one of my questions for you is, as you morph through different processes of transfers and paint peels, and do you do a lot of experimenting with different kind of glues about how you're going to attach these things? And how does that work? How do you discover new ways of applying your ideas to your substrates?
Well, I think a lot of it's serendipity. You get an idea and you're messing around and suddenly something happens. But whenever I try and be scientific and take notes and it never works. I just get bored and I start trying to make an image. But A lot of it is connecting the dots, teaching. Stuff happens in class. We just, in this class I had last week, we made 2 new discoveries that were pretty great. So I think it's a curiosity. It's a what's going to happen here? What if I try this? It's like, you know, being a kid and sticking stuff together. So just this ongoing process, but there's a lot of stuff in my head that only is in my head, you know, that I want everybody to be able to do if they're going to do collages. But anyway.
Hi, thank you both. My question's for Holly. Your work is imbued with a lot of like very personal significance, especially related to photo. Are you ever sort of finding yourself balancing the need before including that imagery, or do you ever feel yourself the need to sort of redact some? And are you ever sort of interested in like the person sort of knowing that connection, or are you more putting trust in them sort of coming to it with their own emotional connection?
So I missed the middle part. What was that?
So you use a lot of like personal imagery,
Right.
and I was ever curious if you feel as though you should sort of curtail that and use more generic imagery in hopes that people have more of a direct connection to it from an outside perspective, or if it's more important for you to have that imbuement that they potentially come across.
You know, I don't control what happens. I'm just the person, it just comes through me. So if I ever say, Holly, we're not going to do that, then forget it. It's just a disaster. So I just have to let whatever's going to happen, happen. I'm not using as many people that I know anymore, like I don't use my family anymore. And I think the animals are kind of more generic in a way. But it's not because I thought, oh, geez, I can't use my daughter's face anymore. It's because that's just where it's led me. But I cannot tell myself what to do. Just a terrible disaster. So.
Thank you.
Hey there, I had a question for both of you, and it started with Letha, and it was, you know, I wanted to ask about the disruption that you make into your photographs and the dismantling of them and sort of destruction. And can you, and Holly, for you too, you have a lot of disruption and a lot of chaos happening. And I just want to know a little bit more about why you're driven to do that and what that means for you.
I think for me, it's like a way of knowing it better, this place. I mean, I'm like very interested in sort of, there's one part where I am at this place and I'm taking these images and I really don't even know what's gonna turn out, but that experience is like important. And then afterwards, looking at the image, and it's totally different than what I remember it being, or maybe it turned out well, or maybe it didn't, but it's like now it's its own thing. So then after that point, kind of like wrestling with it, but it's like kind of, I sometimes think of it as like a love-hate. Like it's so beautiful, I mistrust it, and I want it to do more, and it's like, you know, something about that space, so, yeah.
And I think for me, that the minute I start cutting up the photo, I'm there. But if I try and keep it for what it is as a whole solid thing, then it's too precious, you know, it matters too much. And with my students, I get those scissors out, cut, you know, destroy. So, who else?
All right, thank you, everybody. Just a reminder, tomorrow morning at 8:45 a.m., there will be a ranch-wide orientation right in this building. Thank you. Have a good night.